Now, former Vice President Joe Biden is continuing to get himself into trouble with things that he has said in the past. Now, there are old comments from 1977 that had been unearthed. And in these comments, they quote Biden as saying that a quote, non orderly racial integration would cause his children to grow up in a racial jungle. Yikes. As Archer says, phrasing. Phrasing? Come on. No, here's a quote. Unless we do something about this, my children are going to grow up in a jungle. The jungle being a racial jungle with tensions having built so high that it is going to explode at some point. Again, I wouldn't have gone in that direction, even if he had a point. And we'll look to see if he has a point. But even so, I wouldn't have gone in that direction. Yikes. All right, now, that quote was originally discovered by University of Southern California Law School professor and scholar Daria Rothmeier, and first reported by the New York Times, which published a story on Biden's record on busing and school desegregation. So that's the context of these statements, right? Now, in the quote, which appears to come from a congressional hearing related to anti-busing legislation, which he got destroyed with, during the presidential debate, Biden emphasized wanting to, quote, ensure we do have orderly integration of society, saying that he wasn't just talking about education, but all of society. Okay, so let's be clear. Joe Biden, not against racial integration in his own words, but he is against non-orderly integration because he thinks, oh no, it's going to upset white people. Oh, and it's also going to upset black people too. Well, gee, what are black people more upset by? Or what were they more upset by? Oh, right, being segregated. Now, what is non-orderly integration according to Joe Biden? It would be forced busing. So again, the topic that obviously Kamala Harris did her research on and used as an attack during the debate. So now, what was Biden's solution? Right? So he's against forced busing, but he says, well, I just want to integrate society, but in an orderly way. Well, reviewing thousands of documents at the time, the Times reported that Biden actually preferred expanding affordable housing in the suburbs as a tool of integration over busing. He was against busing. He said no busing. That's going to cause problems. But let's just build more affordable housing in suburban areas, and then we'll have black people move to the suburbs. Which, again, I don't. Okay, so I'm thinking, why don't we do both? Why don't we have busing? Why don't we have affordable housing? I mean, that might help. But why only one? Why only that? Why not do what we did with at least the busing and affordable housing? Well, that's not Joe Biden. See, with Joe Biden, you can't have too much change. Because with him, it's, oh, no, it's radical. It's going to upset people. I can't upset people. I can't upset these the so-called moderates. I can't upset the people on the right who are slightly racist at all, because then they won't vote with me. They won't support me. I mean, basically, that's what they're saying. Now, this gets to the core of who Joe Biden is. He doesn't want to upset, and this was his whole thing. He didn't want to upset white Democrats and white moderate Republicans with too much change. We can't have radical change. Now, the documents also found that Biden teamed up with segregationist Jesse Helms on an amendment that would take away the federal government's ability to withdraw funding as a punishment for school districts that did not sufficiently integrate their student bodies. So no punishment for schools that failed to integrate, mainly in the South. Joe Biden was part of that. Joe Biden teamed up with a segregationist. Biden also went after forced busing, court-ordered busing, bringing forward multiple items of legislation to curb the federal Department of Justice from litigating cases that could result in court-mandated school busing. Now, in comments reported on the Times story, Biden further worried that court-ordered busing would lead to a, quote, race war, damn, and engender resentment among both white and black students. His quote, he said, "You take people who aren't racist, people who are good citizens, who believe in equal education and opportunity, and you stunt their children's intellectual growth by busing them to an inferior school, and you're going to fill them with hatred." He said of a busing plan that would bus white students from the suburbs to urban schools. You know why they did that? You know why that was that plan? Because when the white students get there, for one, parents, he's right, parents are going to get pissed if they're at a so-called inferior school that's not funded properly. What's the first thing they're going to do? They did this in Finland when they decided to cancel all the private schools, charter schools, and have all the rich kids go to the public school. You're going to improve that school. Parents are going to be like, no, I'm not going to have my kid going to an inferior school, so we're going to make the school better. That's the whole purpose behind that. We're going to make the schools better because right now it's not fair that African-American students are stuck in these schools. But here's Biden saying, oh, it's not fair that the white kids have to go to that inferior school now. I mean, that's terrible. What are we going to do about the white children? We got to protect the white children because it's going to make the parents angry. Oh, come on, man. Look, this is the disparity, right? You have affluent white people that were able to go to the better schools. And traditionally, the schools that served more African Americans happen to be poorer. And why? Well, it's not because black people are terrible or anything like that. No, it's because black people have been prevented through laws, racist laws, segregation, not segregation, slavery, and all these different factors, economic factors as well, from generating and building generational wealth. So there were literal laws, Jim Crow, that stopped people, black people, from owning land, stopped people from starting businesses, or vastly discouraged them. The inability for black people to get loans to start businesses, racist zoning laws, etc. Right? They have stunted the ability for black families to generate the type of wealth that white families have been able to. And so black neighborhoods, unfortunately, are more devoid of these of these areas of higher incomes. And the way that we fund schools right now is through property taxes from businesses and houses in residential areas. So of course that gives these schools and unfortunately these students a huge disadvantage. And so I'm going to argue that Biden's solution for making more affordable housing in nicer neighborhoods, not the solution that would work. I mean, what we need to do, obviously, is, yes, to integrate the schools. I agree with the busing. And I also agree with, affordable housing. I agree with all sorts of things that would help the black community. And how do we know what's going to help the black community? Well, maybe we should ask them, because they would happen to know what their community needs more than we do, right? Listen to black voices. Listen to black voices. They know better. Anyway, so now one thing that I do know is that we need to decouple school funding from zip codes and property taxes. We need to fund all these schools at the same level, not the amount, but the same level. And if you do that, you'd actually do a lot to fix the issue of black schools underperforming, because then they'll actually have the resources to be able to teach your students. Now, did Biden consider that? No, of course not. Why? It's because Biden, look, I don't think Biden's he's not a sheet-wearing racist, right? No, he's just not a bold thinker. And he's too concerned, too worried about going towards the slightly racist moderate, right? The person who's got that implicit bias, that falls to some of those stereotypes, that might get upset when we focus on racial and social justice, right? So Biden, he always goes to those people and is not a bold thinker. And his main objective is to have small incremental change. And he's been very consistent on that. The problem is that incremental change does not work. Sometimes you need actual radical change to ensure real justice. And unfortunately, that's not what Joe Biden's about.